In this movie, I'll show you how to set things up so that you can open an image file inside Photoshop just by double-clicking on it here in the Macintosh Finder. If you're working on the PC under Windows, then go ahead and skip to the next movie. Now, if you have access to my exercise files folder, then open it up and you'll find a subfolder inside called O1 Open Image. I'm viewing all the files inside this folder in the icon view, which you can get by clicking on these icons up here in the toolbar. So I'll go ahead and click on the first one in order to view the images as icons. And you can also go ahead and scale the thumbnails to whatever size you like by dragging this little slider in the lower right corner of the window. Now notice that we have 4 image files, all of which are called Welcome with different extensions. If for some reason you're not seeing the extensions, you probably will, but if not, go up to the Finder menu and choose the Preferences command. Then switch to the Advanced tab right here. And notice this checkbox, Show All File Name Extensions. In my opinion, it's always a good idea to have that one on, just so that you can keep the various file formats straight, because they serve various different purposes. Now, notice that we have 4 different formats going on: JPEG, PNG, PSD, which is the native Photoshop document format, and TIFF. And that's because these are the 4 major file formats you'll be working with. I'll explain why that is in a future chapter. But for now, what we want to do is double-click on a file and see if it opens in Photoshop. Hopefully it will. I'll go ahead and double-click on welcome.tiff, and I end up lucking out. It opens up inside Photoshop, as you can see here, and I know I'm working in Photoshop because I can see the word Photoshop up here in the menu bar, but also because I can see a list of panels over on the right-hand side of the screen. We've got a toolbox over here on the left-hand side, and the image is surrounded by this dark gray interface. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say the file opens inside some other program. Well, to see that, I'll go up to the Photoshop menu and I'll choose this command, Hide Photoshop, which will take me back to my Open folder inside the Finder. This time, I'll double-click on welcome.jpg, and it happens for me to open inside Preview, which is a great little program for previewing image files. It's not going to do me any good, however, because if I don't open the image inside Photoshop, then I can't edit the image in Photoshop. So if this happens to you, just go ahead and quit the program by going up to the Preview menu and choosing Quit Preview. And we've got to make a change here. Now, I also happen to know that my welcome.png file doesn't open inside the right program. So I'll shift-click on it in order to select it. And then you want to right-click on either of the files and choose Get Info in order to bring up these Get Info panels here. And I can see that Open With for the JPEG image is set to Preview, and for the PNG image, it's set to an older version of Fireworks. And by the way, if you can't see these options, it's because you need to click on the little triangle next to Open With in order to expand it. And then what you want to do is click on this pop-up menu here and choose the most recent version of Photoshop from the list. You can see in my case, I have several versions installed on this machine. And then click on the Change All button. And you can see that you get this alert message in which the Finder is asking you if you really want to apply this change to all documents that end with the extension JPG. And the answer is yes, so go ahead and click on the Continue button. And then go ahead and run that same change on the PNG file as well, in my case anyway. So I'll go ahead and choose the newest version of Photoshop from this list. And then I'll click on Change All, and I'll click on Continue. And now everything should be straight. So I can just go ahead and close each one of these panels here. And then I'll double-click on the JPEG file. And sure enough, it opens in Photoshop. And I'll go ahead and hide Photoshop again by choosing the Hide Photoshop command from the Photoshop menu. Then I'll double-click on welcome.png. And I really want you to do this as well, if you can, just to make sure that every file format that we'll be working with opens just by double-clicking inside Photoshop. And then finally, one more to go. I'll go up to the Photoshop menu and choose Hide Photoshop and double-click on welcome.psd. This one should, by all rights, open in Photoshop no problem because it's a Photoshop document. However, Photoshop documents may contain layers, and some of those layers can be text layers. And if I'm using fonts that you don't have installed on your machine, which is very, very likely, by the way, then you'll end up getting this missing fonts warning, which tells you that some fonts used in this document are missing on your system. This sounds like a big problem, but it's actually not. So go ahead and click on this button, Don't Resolve. And the reason it's not a problem is because, well, everything looks great on screen. Even though if you scroll up the Layers panel here, which is located in the lower right corner of the screen by default, you'll notice all these T's here, these text layers with little yellow warning icons next to them. That means you don't have that font loaded on your system. I'll go ahead and scroll to the one called Photoshop, which is this big Photoshop item on screen. And I'll also select the Type tool midway down the toolbox here. And that'll show me the font that's been applied up here in the options bar. And it's a font called Burka. It's a line of type font, really great font, but it's unlikely that it's installed on your machine. And yet, if I go ahead and zoom in on this document, which I'm doing by pressing Command+, and then I scroll up using the scroll wheel on my mouse, you can see that we have this super smooth text, and it is Burka. This is actual Burka text, so it looks exactly the way it should. And that's because Photoshop goes ahead and automatically saves a pixel-based preview of your text for every single text layer in a native PSD document, which is a really wonderful thing that other programs don't do. Which means you can go ahead and print this file if you want to. The one thing that you can't do is edit any of the text, because if you try to do that, then Photoshop is going to make you switch to a font that's loaded on your system. And that, friends, is how you set things up so you can just double-click on an image file at the Macintosh Finder and have it open inside Photoshop.